Namaste and welcome back to
YouTube channel. This is the third video of the Bhagavad Gita series. If you haven't watched the previous videos, please watch them. The links are in the description box. Just to give you a small recap, in chapter 3, Lord Krishna provides the technique of Karma Yoga, which is the first step that all of us have to take in order to begin the process of elimination of vasanas. First, he stressed the need to convince ourselves that we have to act. We simply cannot eliminate vasanas by not acting. Once we have convinced ourselves that we have to act, we have to adopt the attitude of Karma Yoga so that further actions do not cause bondage. The attitude of Karma Yoga comprises 5 aspects of knowledge or buddhi that we need to maintain while performing any action. To know more about these aspects, find chapter 3's link in the description. In this video, we are going to learn the teachings from chapter 4. So let's get started. In 4.1, Lord Krishna says, I had declared this imperishable yoga to Vivaswan. He told it to Manu, and Manu told it to Ikshvaku. Shri Krishna gives the parampara or the tradition of the knowledge of the Gita. However, he first says that this teaching is imperishable. It always existed and can never be destroyed. He says that he had revealed the same knowledge a long time ago to Vivaswan. Vivaswan is another name of the sun. The sun then gave this knowledge to Manu. Manu then gave this knowledge to Ikshvaku, who was the first king in the solar dynasty or the Suryavansh. All these kings were Kshatriyas or warriors. He continues in 4.2. In this way, scholar kings knew about this yoga through tradition, but through the long passage of time, this yoga has been lost here. When any teaching passes from generation to generation, the original message gets distorted. Shri Krishna says that even though this knowledge was prevalent in ancient times, it has become distorted due to the long passage of time. In 4.3, he continues, that same ancient yoga I have taught you now, for you are my devotee and my friend. This yoga is the ultimate secret. Arjun asks in the next shloka, your birth is the present and the sun's birth was in the past. How should I understand that you had taught this yoga in the beginning? To this Lord Krishna answers in 4.5, you and I have undergone many births, O Arjun. I know all of those births, but you don't know them. In this shlok, Lord Krishna begins to reveal his divine nature to Arjun. Previously, Arjun raised a doubt as to how did Sri Krishna convey the Gita teachings to the sun. Krishna responds by pointing out the similarity as well as the difference between his birth and Arjun's birth. The similarity is that both Arjun and Krishna have taken births many times in the past. However, the difference is that Sri Krishna had the knowledge and memory of all his prior births, whereas Arjun did not. Sri Krishna could recall what happened in all his births. He did not have any identification to his body, and therefore he is not restricted by its limitations. He was speaking an enlightened being who realized the eternal essence and has dropped identification with his body. In 2.6 he says, though I am beyond birth, imperishable and the controller of all beings, yet by commanding my nature I manifest with Maya. This is an important shlok in the Gita because Sri Krishna reveals himself as Ishwar, the controller of all beings. He says he is not born into this world like an ordinary human. He wills himself or manifests himself into existence by controlling Prakriti, which is made up of 3 gunas. Prakriti is related to both us and Ishwar, but in different ways. While we are usually under the control of Prakriti, it is Ishwar that controls that Prakriti. But both Ishwar and us are nothing but the eternal essence, just like the wave and ocean are made up of water. When the eternal essence identifies with the finite body, it is a Jeev. When it identifies with the entire universe, it is Ishwar. Ishwar has the ability to manifest in any form in the universe. The manifestation could be short-lived, like one thought in a person's mind, or it could be a long-living manifestation like Sri Krishna in the form of a human being. Our Puranic literature describes several avatars in great detail, but these are only a subset of the countless avatars that take place over time. An avatar is like a rain-bearing cloud. It materializes out of thin air, does its work, and quietly disappears. The next two shlokas are probably the most known shlokas of the Bhagavad Gita, and they read, Yada yada hi dharmasya glanir bhavati bharata abhyutthanam adharmasya tadatmanam srijanvyaham paritranaya sadhunam vinashayasya dushkritam dharma sansthapanarthaya sambhavami yuge yuge. Which means, whenever there is a decline in righteousness and a rise in unrighteousness, then do I manifest myself, O Bharat, for the protection of the good and the destruction of the wicked. I manifest in every age to establish righteousness. Lord Krishna described the process of Ishwar's descent or avatar in the previous shlok. Here he speaks about the reason for manifesting as an avatar. He says that whenever there is a decay in dharma and a rise in adharma, during that time he manifests himself in a particular form in this world. Now, dharma means righteousness, but it also means universal harmony. Adharma then becomes disharmony. Let us take the example of our body. Every cell and organ is working for the totality of the human being. It is the spirit of one for all and all for one, which is nothing but the spirit of yajna that we saw in chapter 3. Our heart keeps beating and doesn't ask for any reward or recognition. It just works for the sake of totality. But sometimes a part of the body or the whole body undergoes a situation where something goes wrong. Then the intelligence of the body manifests itself to take care of the situation. If the problem is in one part of the body, then special enzymes are secreted to remedy the situation, and the white blood cells fight off the invaders. Similarly, Ishwar comes either for a short time, like the Narasimha avatar, or for a long time, like the Sri Krishna avatar. Sometimes we find that the entire population thinks the same thought. For instance, an independence struggle or a social movement. That is also an avatar. If we go on polluting the environment with chemicals or stuffs like that, there could be a natural disaster in response. That is also an avatar. Shri Krishna further explains why he manifests himself. He points out three main reasons. The first is to protect good people. Second is destruct wicked people. And third is to establish dharma. This is not a one-time occurrence, although it happens continuously. The word yuge yuge means in every age, but it also means at every juncture, every crisis where there is a conflict that can disturb the harmony of the universe. Having manifested in the world and restored the balance of dharma or harmony, Ishwar lets Prakriti take over. Just like clouds disappear after rain or a fever disappears after we recover from an illness. In 4.9 he continues to say, My birth and action are divine. One who knows this essence, having given up the body, is not born again. He obtains me, O Arjun. Free from attachment, fear and anger, absorbed in me and taking refuge in me, many have been purified through the austerity of knowledge and have attained my essence. In this shlok, Shri Krishna gives the roadmap to attaining eternal essence. First, he advises us to follow the path of Karma Yoga so that our system is cleared of vasanas. It is the preparatory stage in the spiritual path, as we have seen earlier. As we become proficient in Karma Yoga, we also slowly become free of attachment, fear, or anger. Finally, having been purified by the austerity of knowledge, we begin to attain an affectionate attitude towards Ishwar. This attitude of devotion makes us take ultimate refuge in Ishwar. In whichever manner one approaches me, In that manner I favor them. People follow my path in different ways, O Parth. Now, this is the shlok which promotes individualistic rituals and customs of worshipping the god. Lord Krishna says, whatever is the manner in which a bhakta approaches the divine being without any partiality, the Lord favors the bhakt to reach his goals. In the next shlok, the picture becomes more clearer. In 4.12, he says, those who desire success in actions worship deities. For in this human world, results of action are obtained instantly. Shri Krishna says that most of us do not desire self-realization. We only desire material objects because they give us instant happiness. We've been conditioned to perform actions that get quick results. When we want results that are beyond our immediate control, we approach and appease forces in nature that can grant us the results that we need or perhaps want. These forces could be human beings. We may propitiate a local politician if we want to set up a business in a particular town. But no matter how satisfying the result is, it will only give us temporary happiness because we have approached a force of nature that is a subset of Ishwar. Ishwar is the ultimate force in nature. Only he can give us permanent happiness in the form of self-realization. So in 4.13, Lord says, the 4 categories of occupations were created by me according to people's qualities and activities. Although I am the creator of this system, know me to be the non-doer and eternal. Having established in chapter 3 by Lord Krishna, performing one's swadharma or duty in this world is the core karma yoga. But how does one know what is one's swadharma? Shri Krishna addresses this point briefly in the shlok. He says that human beings are categorized into 4 classes or varnas. These classes are based on the 3 gunas and the corresponding action that each guna prompts us to do. Rajas is expressed as an activity or agitation. Tamas is expressed as lethargy or laziness. Sattva is expressed as knowledge and peace. A Brahmin who is predisposed to gaining knowledge, faith, sharing knowledge will have a prominence of sattva. A Kshatriya who demonstrates courage, likes to organize and protect people, faces challenges, takes risks, tries new things, will have a prominence of sattva and rajas. A Vaishya who likes to be creative and produce something will have a prominence of rajas and tamas. A Shudra who likes to execute tasks but requires a lot of motivation will have a prominence of tamas. So in the second part of the shloka, Sri Krishna reminds us that although he has set up this classification of varna, he is not the doer in this act. It is the prakriti or nature that is acting, whereas he is only the witness to its actions. In 2.14, he continues to say, actions do not stain me, nor do I covet fruits of action. One who knows me in this manner is never bound by actions. Here, Lord Krishna says that as Ishwar, even he knows that actions are happening in Prakriti and therefore he is not the doer of those actions, but he is beyond all action. He puts this poetically by saying that actions do not stain him. He reminds us that just like he knows that he is not the doer or enjoyer of actions, even humans should know the exact same conviction. In the next shlok, he convinces to take action since the people born so far have kept taking actions and thus this world has reached to the point where it has reached. It translates as even seekers of freedom, having known this path of karma yoga, performed actions since ancient times. Therefore, you too perform actions like the ancients did. Verse number 4.16 translates to, what is action and what is inaction? Seers are deluded in this regard. To you I will explain that action, by knowing which you will gain liberation from this inauspicious nature of samsara. Action or karma as defined by Shri Krishna is any activity performed with a selfish motive. Inaction or akarma is defined as any activity performed in a selfless manner. In other words, with a yajna spirit. It is important to revise these definitions because Shri Krishna says that even intelligent people very easily get confused by this terminology. since action typically means any activity and inaction means absence of activity. He also says that he will explain these concepts in upcoming shlokas. So in 4.17 he says, the meaning of action should be known, forbidden action should be known, and also inaction should be known, for inexplicable this is the course of action. We examine the meaning of karma as selfish actions, akarma as unselfish actions. Now let's look at what is meant by vikarma. Vikarma or forbidden action refers to any action that is not prescribed in one's swadharma. We need to use our intellect to determine what is vikarma based on our individual situations. For instance, a Vaishya or a businessman, his duty is to conduct business and use the earnings for the benefit of the family and the society as a whole. There is absolutely no harm if he wants to earn more money, as long as he is using it for the benefit of the family and of the society. But if his attention is diverted towards acquiring more girlfriends, that becomes vikarma. So Shri Krishna gently warns us that we need to put efforts to have a correct understanding of this topic, because it is hard to comprehend. Karma is a reaction produced by nature in response to our relationship to it. These reactions come from nature itself. Nature is like a mirror. If you smile at it, it smiles right back. We've all heard the saying, what goes around comes around. That is karma. So what does it mean for us from a practical perspective? We have to constantly use our vivek or discrimination to ensure our thoughts and feelings are working in the spirit of yajna. If our thoughts are selfless, our actions will be selfless. Otherwise, we will go on accumulating karma, which gets lodged in our personality as vasana, which is the very thing that stands between us and self-realization. In 4.18, he says, one who sees inaction in action and action in inaction, he is wise among all people, he is well integrated and accomplishes his actions. Lord Krishna employs his poetic prowess to teach us how to apply the knowledge of karma to our actions. He uses the words karma and akarma, translated into action and inaction, differently in different parts of the shloka. So let's take it part by part. First of all, let us understand what is meant by seeing inaction in action. The word action in this phrase refers to activity of any sort, like thinking, feeling, or working. And the word inaction refers to the constant awareness that the eternal essence, ourself, is inactive and not the doer of action. It means complete detachment from the work and detachment from a sense of agency or doership, because the mind has now attached itself to a higher ideal. So one who sees inaction in action knows that his very activity is happening out of Prakriti or nature. His true identity is the eternal essence that neither does any action nor enjoys the result of any action. From a practical standpoint, it refers to the attitude that we have towards our work. It is the difference between a worker who can perform tough tasks and not feel tired, and the worker who feels that every minute of his work is a burden. Next, let us look at the phrase seeing action in inaction. The word action in this phrase refers to the ego, the notion that I am the doer, as well as the sense of agency in the work, and word inaction refers to absence of activity. So for example, if someone needs help crossing the road and we think I won't help him because I will be late for my bus, behind our absence of helping someone cross the road is a selfish motive. Similarly, if we hold back on admitting a mistake that we've committed, our absence of admitting our guilt is driven by a selfish motive. This is seeing action in inaction. Shri Krishna then goes on to say that one who constantly uses his discrimination, that is vivek, to eliminate all sense of doership from every action, that person is wise and is well integrated in the yajna spirit. That person will accomplish any task that he takes up without fail. His success is guaranteed. Further in 2.19 he says, one who begins all actions devoid of desire and resolve, and whose actions have been burnt in the fire of knowledge, he is called a sage by the wise. In the following 6 shlokas, Sri Krishna gives us extremely practical guidelines to fully internalize the message of this chapter. And the message of this chapter is that only by renouncing the sense of doership and enjoyership one can achieve detachment from action. They are simple, clear, actionable messages. Imagine that we are about to undertake on a new project that is part of our field of work, our swadharma. It could be a presentation at work, a new job, moving to a new city, whatever it is. At each step of the project, our mind entertains different questions. We can use this series of shlokas as a guide throughout the project. Initially, our mind is fully focused on executing the project in the spirit of Karma Yoga. But after a while, it will get distracted and tend to wander towards material objects. This distraction will eventually lead to lack of efficiency in our project. Lord Krishna addresses how to deal with this aspect of the mind. The common meaning of the word sankalp is to make a decision or to resolve. Let's examine the deeper meaning. Whenever we think about an object, there is a constant labeling going on in our mind on whether the object is good or bad. After having gone back and forth, we label something as good or bad. This labeling is called sankalp. Why does this labeling happen? It is because our intellect has been superseded by our mind and senses. For example, a bitter medicine may benefit the body holistically. The intellect knows this, but the sense of taste will not like it. Furthermore, this sankalp or labeling gives rise to kam, or desire for that object. And herein lies the seed of selfish action that distracts us from the goal. Sankalp and kam are interrelated. Any one of them indicates the presence of the other, but both give rise to selfish action. Therefore, we must burn our selfish actions with the fire of knowledge. In other words, he wants our intellect to guide us in our swadharma and stop the mind from labeling objects as good or bad. If something comes to us as part of our swadharma, we must accept it with prasada buddhi. In 420, he says, having given up attachment to the result of action, always content and depending on nothing, he never does anything, though engaged in action. When this project ends, will it give me everlasting happiness? Is the question that we ask explicitly or implicitly whenever we commence any new endeavor. In this shlok, Shri Krishna says that everlasting happiness and contentment is a natural byproduct of Karma Yoga, not of any one particular project. As we grow up, we are programmed and conditioned by the world to believe that happiness is something that is outside of us. This conditioning goes deep inside our psyche and causes us to run after a better job, more money, a bigger house, and things like that. Now, it is absolutely all right to pursue growth while performing one's swadharma. Wealth follows naturally if one follows swadharma sincerely. But constant seeking of happiness from external objects makes us slavishly dependent upon the world. What is so wrong about this seemingly normal tendency to look outside oneself for happiness? Because any happiness gained from the world will be finite and temporary. But Sri Krishna says here that if one depends on the eternal essence instead, he becomes ever content. As the 2nd chapter says, Nabhava vidyate sataha. The self is infinite and eternal. Through Karma Yoga, we lose our attachment to the result of our actions. In doing so, we become less dependent on the external world for happiness. Lord Krishna asks us to use our discrimination to examine the source of our happiness. We should train our mind to check daily whether we have gone outside ourselves to search for happiness, or is it coming from within? If we are attached to the result of our action, we generate an expectation for the future, which means that we identify ourselves with the process of time, which is also a part of Prakriti. Identification with time accumulates karma or negative reaction from the universe. So therefore, one who does not create expectation of a result in the future does not accumulate karma. This is what is meant by the phrase, never does anything in the shlok. Further in the verse 4.21 he says, without expectation, with a subdued body and mind, giving up all possessions, performing actions only for maintaining the body, he does not incur sin. As we proceed with our project, our mind is racing with thoughts and anxieties about the future. Will this happen? Will that happen? What will go wrong? And so on. But when we enter a peaceful place like a temple or a library, we notice that our thoughts tend to quiet down. This is because the insights, smells, and sounds of such places put a fence around our mind and senses and cause them to brood over a higher ideal. So Sri Krishna urges us to contemplate upon a higher ideal as much as possible. When that happens, our mind and our body automatically becomes quiet and subdued. Now in the course of the project, we may end up creating certain objects, for instance a huge report or an Excel file or a PowerPoint presentation or a cutting-edge invention. The wealth generated from the project will enable us to buy a new house or a car or a TV or any other stuff. We may notice that we develop a strong attachment, a strong sense of possessiveness towards these objects. Our ego may get inflated because we think that we created them or we own them. It has to be noted that there is no need to give up possessions. That is not the meaning here. Our attitude towards our possessions should be like a renter versus an owner. We should take care of our possessions but not be bound by them. Slowly, as our possessive thinking diminishes, our actions also reduce. We then care only about our swadharma and on keeping our mind and body fit for service. The attitude created by observing this teaching has the effect of reducing the ego, which is nothing but the false identification of the eternal essence within the body, mind, intellect, or objects. Further in 4.22 he says, content in whatever comes of its own accord, transcending duality, free from envy, balanced in success and in failure. He is not bound even when performing actions. While progressing in our project, we may encounter several situations, some of which we expected and some that we did not. Lord Krishna guides us on how to deal with these situations in this shlok. By definition, Karma Yoga inspires us to work relentlessly. The output of our project may be sometimes favorable and sometimes not. The follower of Karma Yoga knows that he is one of the many variables that determine the output of this work, and is therefore content with whatever comes his way. He does not let unfavorable outcomes impact his level of work. This is the prasad buddhi that we learned earlier. Favorable or unfavorable, success or failure, heat or cold, praise or criticism, this is duality. It arises because our mind tends to label one aspect of nature as positive and reject the other as negative. But the follower of Karma Yoga knows that nothing is absolutely good or bad. It is all part of Ishwar and therefore remains equanimous. This is nothing but samatva buddhi. Our mind has a natural tendency to compare ourselves with others like us. If it perceives us better than others, it generates pride. If it perceives us inferior to others, it generates envy. The follower of Karma Yoga knows that ultimately we are all part of the same higher ideal, Ishwar. Any envy generated in the mind only strengthens the ego. So he never lets envy distract him from his work. It is a quality that he does not encourage. So the inference here is that such a follower of Karma Yoga will continue to perform actions in this world, yet remain unattached because he never lets external situations destabilize his equanimity. He continues in 4.23, one who is unattached, who is liberated, who is established in knowledge, works for the sake of yajna, his actions are completely dissolved. What is the end result of following the practical tips given so far? Sri Krishna says that if we make the yajna spirit a part of our life rather than implement it only in work projects, it has the power to destroy all our vasanas. He tells Arjun that for the person who is totally detached, free from attachments and established in the eternal essence, all of his accumulated karmas melt away like ice before the sun. As we learned earlier, we perform selfish actions as a result of an unhealthy relationship in the world. Each such selfish action generates a negative reaction from the world which accumulates in our psyche as karma. The way out of this predicament is correct knowledge, which is nothing but a healthy relationship with the world where all traces of selfishness are gone, where one works in a spirit of yajna. This attitude of yajna slowly makes us lose our identification with the body, mind, intellect, and material objects. As our attachment goes away, we become liberated individuals. Lord Krishna concludes the current topic of practical karma yoga advice by assuring us that the fire of knowledge burns the masses of karma that we've accumulated, provided that our actions are totally unselfish. Further in 224 he says, Brahma is oblation, Brahma is the offering, Brahma is the fire, Brahma is the one who offers. One whose actions happen while absorbed in Brahma, he only attains Brahma. If we truly perform all actions in this world with an attitude of yajna, not just some actions, our vision of the world changes. In this shloka, Shri Krishna uses the ritual of yajna to paint a picture of what this ultimate vision looks like. We begin to see Brahma, the eternal essence in everything. 6 components of yajna ritual are pointed out here. The act of yajna, the offering, the ladle used to submit the offering, the sacrificial flame, the person who performs the yajna, and the goal that the person wishes to attain. Lord Krishna says that all 6 components of yajna are nothing but the eternal essence. In many Indian households, people chant this shloka prior to eating a meal as a reminder that the food, the body, and the act of eating all are nothing but Brahma. 425 reads, Some yogis also worship deities through devotion. Other yogis engage in worship by offering the self into the sacrificial flame of the self. For most of us, it is difficult to comprehend the formless Brahman. Therefore, many yogis worship a deity. In other words, they invoke Ishwar in a particular idol or a photograph. This offering of services to Ishwar is called puja. Now in puja, imagination plays an important role. Just like children play the house game. The better the imagination, better they enjoy it. The process of puja helps us develop rapport with Ishwar. In addition to seekers who worship Ishwar, there is another group of seekers that are more thought-oriented and more contemplative. They strive to realize the formless Brahma through inquiry, contemplation, meditation, and by understanding their oneness with Brahma. This form of worship is called jnana sadhana, or spiritual practice through knowledge. It is like the wave surrendering completely to the ocean to realize its oneness with the ocean. Further in 426 and 27, Lord explains the various offerings offered by various types of men, and they read as follows. Other yogis offer hearing and other senses into the sacrificial flame of self-restraint. Yet others offer sense objects into the sacrificial flame of the senses. Others offer the activities of the senses and the activities of the life force into the flame of the discipline of self-restraint kindled by knowledge. Others offer sacrifice of materials, austerity and yoga. And others seek with the resolute will offer the sacrifice of knowledge through study of scriptures. 429 reads, Others offer the outward breath into the inward breath, and also the inward breath into the outward breath. Halting the movement of both these breaths, they constantly engage in pranayama. Others regulate their diet, offering the life force into the life force. All these seekers destroy sin through sacrifice, who are the knowers of sacrifice. In 431 he says, Only one who tastes the nectar of sacrificial remnants obtain the ever-existing eternal essence. The non-performer of sacrifice does not have joy in this world. How will he get joy in other worlds, O foremost among Kurus? In this shlok, he urges to implement at least one of the yajnas in our life. He says that one who does not live his life in the yajna spirit will not even be able to function properly in the material world, let alone progress on the spiritual path. For instance, suppose we decide to follow the yajna where we decide to restrict our food intake. How do we actually implement this? Lord Krishna tells us that in all actions that we undertake, we should first perform the yajna and then partake of the remnants of the yajna. So if we see a tasty dish, we perform a yajna on the spot by saying, I first offer all the food to Ishwar because this food belongs to Ishwar. I will only take X amount for myself as the remnant of their yajna. The key point here is we first perform the yajna and then partake of the fruit of the action. We do not rush directly into the action. This lets our intellect override the impulse of our senses. If we truly make yajna spirit a part of our life, we will develop prasad buddhi, which is one of the cornerstones of karma yoga. Since the prasad is a gift from Ishwar, we will not compare it to someone else's prasad. In doing so, we will subdue negative emotions such as jealousy and insecurity. Over time, we will find inner joy in conducting such yajnas every day. This inner joy is called amrit or nectar in this shlok. It will have the power of negating all our sorrows. In 432, he continues to say, in this manner, various types of sacrifices have been explained in the Vedas. Understand that all those are born of action. Having known this, you will be liberated. Having concluded this section, Lord Krishna makes a very important point. He says that while performing these yajnas, we should never forget that any yajna is ultimately an action. In 33, he says, superior to sacrifice of materials is the sacrifice of knowledge. O scorcher of foes, all actions completely culminate into knowledge, O Parth. Having pointed out the defect of finitude in the wide range of yajnas, Lord Krishna praises jnana yajna or the sacrifice of knowledge. Another interpretation, but on similar lines, is that yajna of knowledge is the only one that leads us to the path of shreyas or bliss, rather than the path of prayers or the pleasant. Further in 434 he says, know that by complete surrender, inquiry and service, you will receive instruction from those who have gained knowledge through direct realization of the eternal essence. This means that we should begin by approaching a teacher who has two key qualities. One, he should have realized the eternal essence himself firsthand, and secondly, he should know the technique of communicating this knowledge. Both qualities are essential and complementary. One without the other will not work. Further in 435, he says, having realized that knowledge, never again will you be subjected to delusion in this manner, O Pandav. By that knowledge, you will view all beings completely in you and likewise in me. In 36, he says, even if you are the most sinful among all sinners, you will certainly cross over all sins with the boat of knowledge. Lord Krishna continues speaking about the greatness of knowledge in this shlok. He says that this knowledge has the power of destroying all of our sins completely, regardless of how many sins we committed in the past. Lord Krishna says that the knowledge gained through sacrifice will destroy all sins. How will this happen? This will happen because the sinner himself will be annihilated through his knowledge. The sinner is nothing but the ego, the notion of individuality created by false sense of identification within the finite body, mind and intellect. So therefore, Shri Krishna paints a beautiful picture to deliver this message. He says that we can cross over the river of all our sins with a boat of knowledge. Verse 437 reads, just as a burning flame turns fuel into ashes, O Arjun, so does the fire of knowledge turn all actions into ashes. What he means is that all sins of karmas get destroyed with knowledge. Just as fire has the capability to burn fuel in the form of wood or coal into ashes, so does knowledge totally destroy karmas. Karmas accumulate in our psyche due to ignorance of our true identity. Knowledge and ignorance are mutually exclusive. One cannot remain when the other is present. So when knowledge comes, ignorance is destroyed, and the karmas that were created as a result of ignorance get destroyed as well. Lord Krishna continues to praise knowledge in this shlok and following two shlokas. What he says is, certainly there is nothing in this world as purifying as knowledge. He who is proficient in yoga himself discovers that knowledge in his own self, in due course. Krishna says that this knowledge is ultimately discovered by the seeker himself. Many seekers run to teacher after teacher in hopes of self-realization. They try a teacher for a while, then they go to another if it doesn't work out. Krishna reminds us that ultimately it is our own effort, focus, and motivation that will help us get the knowledge. The teacher is no doubt needed to guide us in the right direction, but the effort to purify ourselves through various yajnas is ours to put in. No one else can do that for us. Once we develop the right qualities of a sincere seeker and become proficient in whatever spiritual practice we follow, knowledge will come automatically. Also, this knowledge is not something that is outside of us. Academic and spiritual literature certainly helps, but true knowledge always comes from within. Lord Krishna also gently warns us that this knowledge will not come instantly, nor will it take thousands of years. It will come when we are ready. In 439, he says, one who has faith, who is completely focused on attaining knowledge and has restrained the senses, obtains this knowledge. Having obtained this knowledge, he instantly attains ultimate peace. In this verse, Lord Krishna explains who is ready to gain the knowledge, which is quite self-explanatory. In the next verse, he says, one who is ignorant, devoid of faith, and who doubts constantly is destroyed. Neither in this world nor in the other worlds is peace attained by the one who constantly doubts. Here he explains the obstacles of disqualifications that prevent us from accessing the knowledge. There are three main obstacles: ignorance, lack of faith, and constant doubting. Fortunate are those who have had the chance to even come across something called spiritual knowledge, scriptures, or Gita. But unless one comes across a taste of the scriptures, one spends their entire life totally ignorant of the eternal reality behind the changing world. So it is this ignorance that becomes the obstacle towards the knowledge of self-realization. Secondly, Lord Krishna says that one who lacks faith will never fully gain this knowledge. As mentioned earlier, we have to possess faith in scriptures, in our teachers, in ourselves, and in the truth of the eternal essence until we gain the knowledge of self-realization. Without faith, we will not last in the long and arduous journey. Finally, the person who doubts everything will also find it difficult to gain knowledge. Now, to be sure, skepticism and inquiry is absolutely important. In fact, it is encouraged by spiritual teachers. But constant doubting without taking efforts to resolve those doubts will become a huge roadblock in gaining spiritual knowledge. Shri Krishna also says that constant doubting is not just an obstacle on the spiritual path, it also prevents us from living peacefully in the material world. In 41, he says, one who has renounced action through yoga, one who has served all doubts through knowledge. Such a self-poised person is not bound by actions, O conqueror of wealth. Lord Krishna now begins to conclude the 4th chapter with a shlok. He re-emphasizes that one who follows the path of karma sannyas, or renunciation of action, is liberated from all bondage. He refers to Arjuna as Dhananjay, which means conqueror of wealth, because Arjuna had accumulated massive wealth from conquests of kingdoms. Also, he had gained wealth in the form of knowledge from Shri Krishna. One who has attained the knowledge of self-realization acts without a sense of doership and enjoyership of the action. It is important to note that renunciation of action refers to renunciation of doership and enjoyership, not renunciation of the action itself. Actions continue to happen. Furthermore, this yoga or prescribed methodology needs to be learned from a teacher. It is difficult to learn on one's own. Lord Krishna also reiterates the knowledge of self-realization dispels all doubts in the seeker's mind. Till this knowledge is attained, doubts such as who is the doer of action, who is the enjoyer of results, what is the relation of the self to action will remain. One who has gained this knowledge and dispelled all such doubts is called Atmavant, or the one who has gained knowledge of our own self. A classic example here is that a space in a pot thinks that it is the pot. Once it knows that it is a space, it immediately realizes that it is not subject to modifications like big or small, brown or white, moving or stationary, and so on. From that point on, any change to the pot will not affect the space in the pot. Similarly, once our doubts vanish, our actions will not bind us. Therefore, with the sword of knowledge, tear your doubts that are born of ignorance and reside in your heart. Establish yourself in this path of yoga and arise, O Arjun. In this concluding verse of the 4th chapter, Lord Krishna urges Arjun to cast away all his doubts and get back to fighting the Kurukshetra war. In other words, he asks the students of the Gita to put the teachings of the 4th chapter into practice and to act in this world. He reiterates the location of our accumulated ignorance. He uses the word heart, but actually refers to the fourfold antakarana, comprising the mind, intellect, memory, and ego. This shlok also provides a concise summary of the 4th chapter. Ignorance in the form of individuality, selfishness, and finitude is our natural condition. This ignorance causes us to question our relationship with the world, just like Arjun got confused in regards to his duty as a warrior. Having gained knowledge in the form of universality, selflessness, and infinitude, we know exactly how to transact with the world. All our doubts are destroyed. We begin to act in a spirit of yajna, where we see the same eternal essence in the actor, the action, and the result. Ultimately, like the shlok says, we arise not just physically, but also spiritually into a new level of consciousness. This concludes the 4th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita.
So in summary, the journey from the 1st chapter to the 4th chapter is one of higher and higher levels of tuning our personality. In the 1st chapter, we were at the level of selfish action, where we see gain and loss in everything we do. As we move into 2nd and 3rd chapters, we are introduced to the notion of nishkam karma, or desireless action. Here we slowly give up our attachment to the result of our action by dedicating it to a higher ideal. In the 4th chapter, we move one level higher from desireless action to agency-less action. What does agency-less action mean? As the key shloka in this chapter indicates, it is the ability to see inaction in action and action in inaction. When we are operating at the level of a karma yogi, we express our desires through performing actions, but we diminish our sense of mindness or enjoyership by dedicating all the results to Ishwar. But as we progress on this path, we begin to realize that all actions happen through Maya, and Maya is nothing but Prakriti or nature. We realize that the I, the eternal essence, is just the witness. The I does not do anything. This is agency-less action. Our sense of doership or I-ness begins to diminish as well. Ultimately, everything is yajna in Brahma. This is a very deep and subtle means of looking at the world. To help us practice developing this vision, Lord Krishna gives us simpler yajnas such as restraining our senses, worship of a deity, and so on. But the end goal is jnana yajna, or the sacrifice of knowledge. The next chapter goes into more details about the characteristic that we have to develop in order to be able to realize this very subtle and deep vision. In this chapter, he also gives us a glimpse of Ishwar, the cosmic power and intelligence that controls this universe. Although beyond birth and imperishable, that power manifests itself whenever there is an extreme disharmony in the universe. It restores harmony and becomes unmanifest again.
If you've enjoyed the video and liked the explanation, please click the like button and share the video with your friends so that they can gain the knowledge of the Bhagavad Gita.